Welcome to our 191st online gathering for faith leaders across the country. This regular gathering is called Courageous Leadership, and it's sponsored by ELCA's coaching ministry. I'm Jill Beverlin. I use the pronoun she, her, and I am the Director of Coaching Ministries for the ELCA, and blessed to be one of your facilitators today. As I hope you know, our ministry has an intentional connection with the truth and healing movement of the ELCA, and as such, we will begin our time together by offering a land acknowledgement. And with this, I want you to know that I'm speaking with you from my home on the Fox River in Appleton, Wisconsin, which is the ancestral homelands of 5 nations of Native Indigenous peoples: the Menominee tribe, the Ho-Chunk Winnebago tribe, the Potawatomi tribe, the Oneida tribe, and the Stockbridge-Munsee Band of Mohicans and the Brothertown community. I honor and respect the diverse Indigenous peoples connected to this land on which I live. Because we understand that all land is Indigenous land, I now invite each of you to name in the chat the Indigenous peoples or tribal nations who were the first to love and care for the lands and places where you are now located. Along with this, it is important that we acknowledge all of our Indigenous siblings who continue to care for this land and call it their home. And if you are Indigenous, we invite you to name your people or tribal nation in the chat feature now so that we may see you more fully in this virtual space. Friends, through these gatherings, we are committed to creating a safer and braver space where we are able to bring the truth of who we are and how we are doing. And with all of this said, we proclaim that these conversations are meant to be an intentional step to live more fully into God's dream for us as the body of Christ. So again, welcome on this second Wednesday in July. How are we at that point on the calendar already? We indeed are blessed to have each of you with us today, and I look forward to diving into our conversation. And as a way to set the stage, I want to share a short reflection with you. And I invite you to be intentional about noting the Spirit of Jesus in this space with us as I do so. It'll take me just a minute to get to my screen. All right, friends, so thumbs up if you are seeing it. Good deal. I am so happy to hear that. Okay, so here are 2 verses for us to ponder for a moment. What comes out of a person is what defiles them. Mark 7, verse 20. And this one from Proverbs that I believe most of us have heard. The one who has knowledge uses words with restraint, and whoever has understanding is even-tempered. And here's our reflection. These verses can stop us short. In this instantaneous world of ours, many of us struggle to think before we speak or act. Let's face it, friends, popping off a snappy response to a Facebook post can feel very gratifying, if even for a little bit anyway. And then sometimes when we look back, we realize our sharp words and what we thought was witty and wise has actually brought harm and hurt to others. When we speak and act without thinking, we can potentially and inadvertently heap diminishment on those that already struggle to find even a shred of self-worth in their existence. Listening instead of responding, thinking before reacting, and praying in advance of speaking are 3 related skills the Holy Spirit wants us to acquire and develop. James, the half-brother of Jesus, says it this way. Understand this, dear brothers and sisters. You must all be quick to listen, slow to speak, and slow to get angry. Human anger does not produce the righteousness God desires. Mark Twain might seem like an unexpected prophet, but he captured the essence of this concept when he said, it's better to keep your mouth shut and be thought a fool than to open your mouth and prove it. How many of us feel seen? I don't know. Reacting rashly out of anger or quickly out of defensiveness nearly always gets us into unnecessary conflict. Our topic today will help us understand more deeply how we can understand our emotions in new and fresh ways, which will then free us to respond in encouragement and prayer, to be quick to listen and slow to anger, and to respond and act in love. Please pray with me. God of mercy and peace, you created us in your own image and likeness, but our egos often get in the way, and we choose to speak and act in ways that do not honor you, nor do they love and encourage our neighbors. We thank you for the gift of this day and the opportunity to gather together to learn from and encourage one another. I thank you for Nathan and for Jason and all of the leaders gathered here live and those who will hear this through the recording. Send your spirit to be with us and to us as we hear in the book of James to receive the wisdom that comes from heaven. May we be peace-loving, considerate, submissive, full of mercy and good fruit, impartial and sincere. May we be peacemakers in your world, sowing seeds of peace, love, and healing, bringing forth a harvest of righteousness. We lift this time to you, and in your precious name we pray. Amen. And again, friends, welcome. It is my honor and privilege to introduce to you once again to our space, the Reverend Dr. Nathan Swenson-Reinhold. Nathan was the very first speaker that we brought to this space back in March of 2020. And I personally feel like I've lived 5 lifetimes since then.
Oh, you've at least lived 191 episodes.
Okay, yes, thank you. Thank you for pointing that out, Nathan. Yes. So in
It
addition,
is a lifetime.
It is. In addition to being my friend, Nathan is, which I don't think he would put it first of the line, but maybe up there at the top. I don't know.
At the top. Yeah.
Nathan is an ELCA pastor, a professional coach, and consultant who does deep work in leadership development, fundraising, and strategic planning in all sorts of realms, but especially with nonprofits and faith-based communities. Nathan currently lives in Texas with his beautiful wife, Erin. They have 3 children who are in various stages of leaving the nest and preparing to leave the nest. Nathan's journey in life has taught him many things, and he has chosen to use this knowledge and his gift of teaching to help others learn. Nathan, we're so glad that you're here today. Thank you for being with us. And I want to thank you publicly for being such an instrumental partner in growing ELCA's coaching ministry and for helping us use this skill to love and serve, especially our faith leaders across the country. My dear friend, welcome back to Courageous Leadership.
Thank you. I don't know how to follow that. That was a really beautiful introduction, and I didn't write any of it. It was most of the time people read the introductions I provide. That was awesome, Jill. Thank you so much. No, it's been great to be in partnership with ELCA coaching, but especially during this season of your leadership, Jill. You and Jason, your executive team have done so much to change, I think, the coaching culture for our denomination for the better. And I have some of the ancillary sideways conversations. I know that we're also impacting denominations laterally. So it's neat to see us have an impact that's bigger than the echo chamber of the ELCA, which I think is really, really wonderful. So it's great to be back with you guys. I think this conversation was actually the brainchild of Jason O'Neill, who does some work with me at Summit Coaching Behavioral Consulting, my shingle. And Jason, you're the one who approached me about talking about this or something related to this, I think. So what I have to show you today is actually I'm trained in a system of teaching emotional intelligence and behavioral styles called Take Flight Learning. And this is their content, so I cannot share these slides with you. I apologize ahead of time. I'm not showing you the whole thing, but I'm showing you stuff that's germane to this conversation about EQ. This journey of EQ conversation is actually relatively new in my consciousness. Doing people well, doing human well has been central to my identity as a leader. Well, it's how I was formed by the people who formed me in leadership. It's just taken me years to give language to it. And I have come to note that over the years, the majority of my staff supervision as a head of staff and the majority of my coaching, even when the what that clients were coming with was super technical, it always ended up distilling down into how well or not that particular client was doing the human piece. We just, somebody said it like this: wherever I go, there I am. Wherever our clients go, there they are. They're taking their strengths, their weaknesses, they're taking their blind spots, they're taking their aptitudes, they're taking their ineptitudes. All of those things are portable, and they go with us wherever they are. And that creates weal and woe and blessing and cursing and everything in between. For us who coach leaders, whether those leaders are rostered or unrostered, whatever the case may be, chances are we've either had our dark moments as leaders ourselves or followed people who've had very dark moments. In one of my calls, I followed a pastor who for 6 years routinely stood in the church office and would stamp his feet and yell and shout like a toddler. And when I got there, the congregation thought that was normal lead pastor behavior because they had been enculturated into it. Not surprisingly, there were key bullies in the church that also thought that was appropriate behavior. And they did that out loud in public in front of everybody. And nobody would call them on it. Why? Because it was established okay behavior, right? So I was able to quickly change the culture in that context. But that's a great example of a leader who's probably not in touch with their internal emotional reality, number one, and has no ability to self-regulate, number two. They go immediately from stimulus to response. There is no intellection between those two moves. There's no opportunity for reflection. And I am feeling very enraged right now. What are my options? What are my constructive options? Didn't happen, right? And my observation is that people, we're not taught these things. For those of us who are trained in seminary contexts, many of us trained in other sort of master's contexts or even bachelor's contexts, these are not things that we talk about in terms of, I think, a helpful framework, but there is a basic helpful framework. The emotional intelligence 4-quadrant framework is super, super helpful as an access point to begin to reflect on these things. And that's what I want to talk about, at least briefly today. So I'm going to run through a lot of slides with a lot of content, and we'll have about 5-10 minutes for breakout. So my question, I'm just going to tee it up. My question for reflection when we do breakouts at the end of this will be, which part of this conversation today is speaking to your spirit as important for you as a leader to focus on? I'm okay. It's easy for us to see the bad behavior of others, but emotional intelligence begins with self-awareness and reflection. So that's where I'm going to ask you to go first. Look inward, and then we can look outward. And hopefully this will be helpful. So I'm going to share my screen. And I'm just going to say, nope, I did that wrong. I'm going to share my screen, take two. For as much as I do presentations, you'd think I'd have this figured out. So this is called, in its original form, Taking Flight with EQ. I'm only doing a fraction of the actual training. The training itself is a full 8-hour training with breakout sessions, materials, the whole 9 yards. So I'm just doing a piece of this. And Jason and I came up with the title, or Jason may have come up with it unilaterally. I don't remember which. And if he did, that's fantastic. This works great. The building blocks of EQ. That's what we're talking about today. So emotional intelligence refers to the ability to perceive and recognize our emotions, understand and evaluate our emotions, manage and control our emotions, words and actions, influence the emotions in others to build relationships and get results. Emotional intelligence can be increased through heightened awareness and practice. And we know that IQ can be grown to some extent. I know people in psychological circles will argue about this. IQ can actually be grown too, but it is less pliable than emotional intelligence. Emotional intelligence can be grown huge through intentional work, reflection, engagement, and coaching. So there are 4 components of EQ. There's self-awareness. which is accurately recognizing one's emotions and behaviors. There's the regulation component, self-management, productively managing one's emotions and behaviors. There's social awareness. Some systems of EQ will call this empathy, which is, I think, a helpful word. Accurately perceiving and understanding the emotions and behaviors of others. And there's a regulation component of this as well. It's the relationship management, understanding how one's emotions and behaviors impact others. When I do this, it produces this in my congregation. When I do this, it produces this in my coworker. When I do this, this produces this in this person I'm interacting with, and awareness of those dynamics. So recognition of the spaces, both the space of the self and the space of others, and then regulation of those spaces. Awareness of when I'm having this emotion, here are the options available to me for response, for dealing with those emotions, for dealing with this situation. And when this person is having this kind of emotional response, I don't need to be purely reactive either, right? How many people do you know, somebody starts showing sadness and they're on empathy like that before they're even asking the question, what is the appropriate response of support for this person? Because it may not be to go put your arms around them, right? There's that social awareness, what's actually needed here. So 2 spaces, 2 conversations of regulation. Why is EQ important? Accumulated data from 40 studies looked at the personal traits and business success of more than 65,000 entrepreneurs. The studies considered EQ and cognitive performance, as well as measures of business success like revenue, profit, company growth, and company size. Researchers found that general mental ability explained 11% of entrepreneurial success, while emotional intelligence explained 89%. What I think is fascinating is church is supposed to be a human space. By definition, and my observation about church here on planet Earth is that we haven't been doing it well. So I don't have any data points on EQ in the church or EQ in pastors. My experience of pastors is that we're not a very high EQ culture. Yes, I said that out loud. And I'm one of them. Tammy is smiling. Tammy, is that a smile of agreement? Tammy has been working with pastors longer than I have. So that smile is, that's a great smile. Data is clear, EQ matters, right? This is from Daniel Goleman. Many of you have probably have on your bookshelves. It just ran out of my head. His seminal work from, I think it's almost 25 years ago, which deals with emotional intelligence. In fact, I think he put the conversation in popular parlance on the map. But he writes, a leader's emotional style creates a certain culture. A leader's mood and behaviors drives behaviors of others. So understanding your impact on others, and you adjust your emotional style. But I know very few leaders who think about how they show up and where they show up and the impact how they're showing up is having on the culture around them. Not just the staffs that they work with, but the congregation they work with. I see this all over the place. And I'll tell you, in a space where a prophetic word is needed, often people cannot hear a prophetic word from the pulpit because it's coming from an unemotionally intelligent person. The rejection is not of the prophetic word. The rejection is the lack of the humanity of the person. They're not the same thing. But I used to train interns that whether for as high-minded as we like to be about who we are as leaders in Christian circles, the truth is we're still fundamentally primates. And when we stand up in front of human communities, the people that are sitting there listening to us are answering one unconscious question before anything else, and that is, do I feel safe with this person standing up there? If the answer is no, they're not moving emotionally towards you, they will not be able to receive what you have to say. If the answer is yes, they're way more likely be able to emotionally and intellectually digest what you have to say. I don't know anybody else who's talking about this, but I think it's a really, really critical thing. Who we are, how we manifest who we are really, really matters to the communication events that are central to our Christian identity. And I think communication event is the entirety of the Christian identity. We're here to communicate kingdom in Christ to the world. There are 8 basic emotions. How many of you have seen In and Out 2? If you haven't seen it, it's mandatory watching. Matthew, what'd you think? I thought it was fantastic. I thought it was way better even than the first one. The first one was good. Second one's fantastic. What'd you think, Matthew?
I thought it built on a really strong one of the first one in a way that not only opened up the concept to the next more complicated stage of life in terms of adolescence, but was true to the balance needed among all of those emotions and the recognition that you can't put a thumb on the scale in any direction and still be a whole human. Not to get Jungian about the shadow self or anything.
It's
but
true.
sort of in that kind of
Yeah.
way. Really great. My very briefly, my younger child was like, I didn't like it, not because it wasn't good or emotional, it's just a lot.
That's true. And I think part of the reason I really enjoyed this one in particular was it introduced the character of anxiety. In this right here would be called anticipation. Things that I think are really germane to our human conversation right now. Anticipation or anxiety drives so much of our dysfunction when we don't have it properly managed, when anxiety isn't given her or his appropriate chair. And that's a reference to the movie. You'll have to see it if you haven't to know what I'm talking about. But anyway, suffice it to say that from a psychological perspective, we talk about 8 basic emotions. There's a lot more emotions than that. There's hundreds of emotions. But I use the reference of Inside Out 2, because if you look at the characters that are introduced, they come from this wheel. They all come from this wheel. Now, in EQ conversations, there's a difference between emotions and feelings. Anybody know what the difference is? Okay. Emotions are actual physiological responses we're having to the context that we're experiencing. So when you feel joy, trust, fear, surprise, sadness, disgust, anger, anticipation, there are physical, chemical correlates to that are being pumped through your body. Your body is actually having a physiological response. Feelings are your interpretation of your emotions. So one of the key tasks for doing human better, both for ourselves as leaders and for helping others, is growing their capacity to name their feelings and their emotions, growing the language people have. Because for many of us and many of our children, the language we have around this stuff is really, really limited. So the more language we have, the more powerful we can become in leadership, because to name it is to tame it. If we can identify the experience that we're having, we can right size it very, very quickly. And just say that pause principle, when you've been stimulated, before you do anything, count to 7. Think Robbins, what's her name? Her first name, I forget it, but Robbins has this count to 7 principle, and that's what she's talking about. Before you respond to anything, count to 7. Insert the pause principle. Why? Because the pause allows us to take stock. What am I feeling? What am I experiencing? When we name that stuff, put handles on it, now we have options or choices about how we can address it. That makes sense, right? You see how basic and reductive this is, and yet how powerful all the stuffs go together. So emotions can intensify if not recognized and managed. And conversely, when they're identified, recognized, and managed, we have the power to right size them, not make them go away. That's not the goal. The goal is just to let them live as a part of a gestalt of who we are, not a key controlling principle of who we are, but a part of our total human conversation, with us fully present and able to manage and live through whatever that experience is. So let's talk about personality briefly related to this. The American Psychological Association defines personality as individual differences and characteristic patterns of thinking, feeling, and behavior. The way that we think about this from a take flight standpoint is behaviors are your style. So you might talk about Enneagram types, you might talk about Myers-Briggs types, or you could talk about DISC styles, which is the space that I typically live in. And then there's tons of other stuff. There's Strengths Finder. There's all sorts of great tools out there that really are engaged at style. that will point towards the thoughts and feelings and approaches, emotional approaches of people towards the situations that they're in. So we would say style plus EQ equals personality. So let's talk first about self-awareness. And these are questions for later reflection. How well do you know yourself? Are you able to identify your emotions? Do you know how your emotions affect your behavior and performance? I got to tell you, I do a lot of coaching around this particular question. How is your frustration affecting how you're showing up for your direct reports? By the way, in coaching, remember in the old days, we were taught one of the litmus tests for whether we should coach somebody is whether or not we like them. And the rationale for that behind that was if we don't like somebody, we won't show up for them. Why? The emotional content and context of who we are shapes how we show up for people, especially if we're not aware of it. So asking that basic question, is this a person I want to spend time with? Is this a person I feel called to invest in? Is really, really critical. By the way, pastorally, this is an issue too, for those of you who are pastors on this call. And this is where making sure that pastoral care is not a solo ordained pastor sport in congregational context is essential. Why? Because we're not designed to pastor everybody in our flocks, nor can we. Not everybody in our flocks wants us to. So having a diversity of a team is really, really essential because we click with some people, we don't click with others. And if you're a pastor or a deacon or ordained leader or whatever the case may be, or just a leader in the church, and somebody doesn't click with you, you don't have to take that personally. That's just human chemistry. It's okay. Find the person they do click with and give them other options. We need to ask those questions as coaches too, right? If you don't click with somebody, that doesn't say anything bad about the person. It doesn't say anything bad about you. It just says the chemistry isn't right. So refer. But I think that works in all sorts of different spaces and environments. Self-awareness has talents. I think this is really unique to Take Flight's approach to this. We talk about emotional clarity, 4 talents, emotional clarity, which is identifying and naming your emotions, self-reflection, thinking about your emotions and triggers. How many of you have triggers? I mean, great coaching exercise for us, like if you're self-coaching, just sit down and catalog all of your triggers. What are all the things that get you angry and upset? As an awareness generating exercise, it's incredibly powerful. Next question, what do you want to do with those triggers? I just changed your lives. I'm serious as a heart attack. I just changed your lives. You do those 2 exercises, you will change your very existence. So self-reflection, thinking about your emotions and triggers. Cause and effect, understanding how your emotions affect your performance. How does my bad day affect how I show up for others? Show up in the pulpit, prepare a sermon, show up for that pastoral call at the hospital. It's my one that I know of that I would call a lose my shit moment, and I'm going to cuss, and Jason can edit this out after the fact or bleep out the bad language, but my one lose my shit moment happened in August of 2021 on a council meeting day. I woke up tired and exhausted. I knew I was tired and exhausted. It was the day that my associate pastor was doing a formal exit interview with the council with all of us present. And I knew that would go well, but I had a bunch of staff turnover happening. I was at my wit's end and I was tired. So I took a 2-hour nap that afternoon. It didn't do a damn thing. I was still exhausted and tired, and I still had to go to this meeting. If I could have called an audible, I would have, because I knew I didn't have the emotional reserves I really needed to show up in that space well. And I could see the train wreck coming, and it came. I got lucky. It catalyzed a ton of really positive things in the leadership culture. I'd not recommend losing your shit as a strategy for changing culture. But for the first time in 6 years, my leaders heard me in terms of the toxic culture we've been dealing with. And it took me having a significant emotional event for people to finally pay attention and for things to click. So it ended up turning out incredibly well, but I think I got lucky. And for me, that was in the last 23, 24 years of my leadership, my lowest point. So cause and effect, understanding how your emotions affect your performance. I knew I was going to have to be careful that night, and I got blindsided by something I didn't anticipate or expect, and that was the last straw. Not a great moment for Nathan Swenson-Reinhold. Maybe you guys can relate. Maybe you have a similar situation, right? Confidence, final talent, having a positive belief in yourself. The beautiful thing about the self-awareness pieces, these things, is as you work through them with people or yourselves, that self-awareness, I think, creates a more accurate and ultimately positive appreciation of who you are. Too often the voices of anticipation, anxiety, et cetera, speak loudly, but I think this kind of comprehensive reflection on ourselves is incredibly powerful as a way to move us into a better comprehension and understanding. None of us is great at everything. None of us is great at everything, but we all have superpowers. Do you know yours? If you don't, you should. This is where Gallup Strength Finder is incredibly salient and important, I think, in terms of conversation, social conversation, because their observation is your greatest capacity for growth is in your area of giftedness, not in your areas of weaknesses. So strengths should be grown and invested in, weaknesses should be managed. Anyway, self-management. This is the regulation part related to self-awareness. How well do you manage your emotions? Are you able to adapt to changing conditions? To what degree can you control your impulses? Self-management actually has 5 talents. Discipline, which is staying focused and controlling impulses. Drive, always forging forward. Accountability, taking ownership for your own emotional content. How many people, maybe you've done this before, blame somebody for the feelings you're having, right? Accountability, taking ownership for your own experience, adaptability, adjusting to change effectively, and finally, optimism, having a positive outlook. Let's talk about social awareness. Do you understand what others are feeling? Can you look at another human being and wander into the emotional space? I will tell you that as I'm working towards my MCC, and I'm within 100 hours now, as I'm working towards my MCC, almost all of this is presencing conversation for me, at least. I don't know what it'll be for you if you push into that space in your own coaching work, but it's presencing, and it has to do with not just seeing, but naming in conversation the experiences that people are having and inviting them into reflection on it. So this other awareness and how that shows up in your coaching and how you navigate that space, incredibly critical. Do you understand what others are feeling? Can you accurately read the energy and emotions of a group appropriately? How well can you understand the unstated needs of others? We talk about 4 talents with regards to social awareness, which is empathy, understanding how others feel, a service mindset, helping and supporting others, team dynamics, reading and helping a team, and then perception, reading others' emotions, plural, which I think is interesting because how many of us have walked into congregational contexts and there is as St. John would say, or Walter Wink in his Naming and Engaging the Powers, for those of you who read those works, that there is a spirit of a group of people. When we talk about the spirit of a group of people, we're talking about the emotional gestalt, the emotional identity, unspoken, unnamed, often subconscious, where all the subconsciousnesses of those human beings are looped and engaged together, and they create a spirit. And sometimes those spirits are helpful, they're optimistic, joyful, supportive, encouraging, empathetic, and sometimes those things are off-putting, judgmental. So this is where we start talking about the spirit of a community. Empathy is understanding how others feel, recognizing and understanding others' needs and emotions, seeing things from others' perspectives, and picking up on verbal and nonverbal cues. Sympathy, related empathy, is understanding from your perspective. Empathy is understanding from theirs. Say that again. Sympathy is understanding from your perspective. Empathy is understanding from theirs. I'm going to skip that. Relationship management. The last piece of regulation. Now we're talking about how we work in the space between the experience that other person is having, ourselves, knowing the space where we begin and end and where they begin and end, and how we respond to that dynamic. Can you manage and inspire emotions in others? How do you use your interpersonal skills to build lasting relationships? Are you able to work collaboratively towards a shared goal? Relationship management talents, there are 5 of them. Collaboration, which is working together effectively. Influence, inspiring action in others. Change catalyst, championing change. Connection, developing and nurturing relationships. And conflict management, effectively using emotions during conflict. Let's talk about these things. Collaboration, working together effectively, is helping others to accomplish their objectives, seeking different perspectives when solving problems, and sharing information to keep people in the loop. That last one, I see there's something about ministry. Most of the pastors I work with are power holders. They bottleneck information. They're scared that if other people get empowered, they'll somehow be out of a job. That's not the case. I guarantee you, if you equip and empower other people and try to work yourself out of a job, you'll be busier than ever. But you got to do it to learn it. But sharing information to keep people in the loop, that's a hard one, I think, for ordained leaders. And I'm not going to do that piece, I apologize. Influence, inspiring action in others, motivating others to take action and achieve goals, persuading others through a balance of logical and emotional appeals, and displaying charisma when influencing others. And I guess that was the end of that. So let me stop share and come back. And just for a few minutes before Jason pushes us out into breakout sessions where we talk about maybe what's standing out to us as an important piece of this conversation today. Anything in general thoughts? You can throw those in the chat area, or you can unmute yourself and just talk out loud. What do y'all think? Some of this is old hat for many of you.
I was just going to say, Nathan, that the way in which it's put together, I have not seen it put together in this manner. And I think that that makes the overall stronger to see how the pieces interrelate. So thank you.
I love this content. I love it. I love it because I think it makes the EQ conversation way more accessible than how I read it in the 3 or 4 books I read back in seminary and in my doctoral program. Yeah, thanks, Janice. Janice or Janice? Fix me now.
Whatever. No, Janice.
Janice, okay. I knew as soon as I said Janice, that was wrong. Thanks, Janice. Appreciate that. Other thoughts? Then let's do this. Jason, would you push us into some breakout groups? And here's what you're talking about. What was your most important insight, learning, conviction? I don't care. You fill in the blank. Your most important ... from this 30 minutes together.
Welcome back, friends. We hope that you had blessed and inspired conversation. And as is our habit, we encourage you to share, especially while we still have Nathan in the room, questions or themes or learnings that surfaced for you from this beautiful plethora of information that was shared. Maybe there's an action step or two that you're inspired. Like, how are you going to take this, take a piece of it, and integrate it into what you're doing as a leader? Now's the time. Let's learn from each other.
Jill, this is Joanne. I'm going to take away the question that Nathan asked. Do I feel safe with whoever is standing in front of me? I am on the committee that's working with our intern. And when Nathan mentioned that question, I decided I'm going to find a way to talk about that in the confines of our committee. It's a very useful question. So thank you, Nathan.
You're welcome. You're welcome. Kristen asks, she realized you missed one of the teachings. Is it emotions that are physiological happenings in the body, or is it feelings? Emotions are the physiological experience. Feelings are the intellection of them, how we name them, experience them. And that's where that's a place where emotional intelligence can really be grown. Is I'm married to a licensed clinical social worker. She's also a pastor, but she's a licensed clinical social worker. So we always heard, all of us, use your words. Use your words. What are you feeling? Right. And she had the feeling chart that she bring out. Which feeling are you having? Right. But actually, as silly as that sounds, we should all have those charts up on our wall and be able to ask the question, what feelings am I having today? Because, there's all sorts of shades of blah or meh. What specifically meh am I having today? Like, you can get really, really granular, and that's empowering, because you'll find that different kinds of meh show up with different kinds of life circumstances and experiences. They reflect different happenings. What does that awareness mean for you, for your own agency? Many of you have been trained by me in other spaces. I talk about awareness, clarity, and agency. Our coaching of ourselves or of others should always give us more options of opportunities to utilize our lives in constructive ways. Anyway, sorry. Feelings are a secondary intellection of emotions. That's correct. So fear has a biochemical imprint in our bodies. What our organs do, adrenal glands pumping out adrenaline, and there's actually there's a chemical signature for fear, chemical signature for sadness, chemical signature for all of these things. So there's basic stuff, and then there's our understanding of what those things mean. That's feelings. And I think actually both of those spaces are helpful spaces. What feelings are you having? What emotions are you having? Because feelings invites your client to look inside of their bodies. Or emotions invite you to look inside of your bodies. Feelings invites us to look at the whole emotional gestalt that's larger than that, our experience of that situation, our history with those words, like history of depression and anxiety, which I fight with. When I talk about those things, I'm bringing in that history of that conversation as well, not just the current physical experience, but all of the meaning related to that. Anyway. Another great resource, Jason says, Brené Brown's Atlas of the Heart, which is absolutely fantastic. Yeah. What other things did you talk about in your groups? If anybody be willing to share, and it's not breaking confidentiality.
I shared a friend of mine in New York City had a back surgeon that he had gone to, who later wrote a book. It was very interesting. He said he developed a practice of anybody who came to him for back surgery or surgery for back pain. The first thing he did was send them for psychological counseling, and 80% of them never came back.
We carry our stresses in our bodies. In that sense, the majority of us are somatizers to some extent. It means we live our emotional realities and trials and tribulations out inside of our bodies. Pro tip for those of you who are Enneagram 2s, you are especially prone to this. For those of you who speak Enneagram.
We used to invite councils to use the emotions and feelings charts before they started a council meeting, just to kind of get a sense of what was going on with each other. And then to be able to be aware and prayerful and understanding where that person's perspective is coming from. So.
That's fantastic. You just blew my mind. I never thought about using something like that with a team or with a council. That's a great idea. Thank you, Tammy. Fantastic. Melissa writes, our issues are in our tissues. Yep. Yeah. They say that in Reiki too.
And I've been surprised at how many ELCA leaders I've run into they kind of lean in conspiratorially and own, I'm a Reiki healer. I wish that people would start owning that more broadly. There's so much to this. Nathan, thank you so much for being with us. I think that we are just at the tip of unpacking the power of this. What's a way that people could learn more if they are so inspired? If you could put that in the chat, that would be great.
Okay, let me just contact me. I do trainings periodically, both for Take Flight Learning, which is a really easy, accessible way to get into the DISC system and understand human behavior. I think half the challenge is we need to not only understand ourselves, but understand the behavior of others. So it forms a really wonderful, easily accessible framework for getting into growing the EQ conversation. And then, Jason, this is just something for me to say out loud. We should schedule an actual full EQ training for the fall. So we'll try to make that stuff accessible to this community if you're interested in it. And yeah, we'll go.
Always watch our events page on elcacoaching.org. Nathan is a longtime training partner with us, and we have so much to be grateful for, as I said. Friends, we hope that you'll come back next week. We have the blessing of having our beloved friend, Deacon Tammy Devine, back. She's representing the work that she and Brenda have been doing with us leading up to the election. And next week's topic that will be on the table is the topic of compassion. I don't know about you. It's difficult for me to access that particular feeling/emotion right now when I think about some of the political things. So Tammy, we desperately need you to help us learn and to help us help the members of our communities with this. This is just so important. And of course, it's all leading up to a day of prayer that ELCA Coaching Ministry will be hosting. It sounds like there may be other things in the works. Spirit is still shaping this. So friends, as always, as you leave, please remember that you are seen, you are valued, and you are deeply loved. Nathan, thank you again for this time. It's been a blessing.
Thank you for inviting me. God bless you all. Great to be with you. Thanks.